So this week, Laura and I are going to be talking to you about a topic that's kind of born out of a quote that keeps rearing its head in my life. And most recently, it came to me during one of my morning workouts. One of my favorite trainers ever. She has the most inspirational quotes
She
throughout
really
the entire
does.
workout, right? Like she,
Mhm.
every single program she has, I think I heard her say somewhere that she actually prepares the quotes and like puts them on a big like piece of paper or on a computer screen that we can't see. And you can always tell when she's gearing up for another one. And this one struck me last week so much that I actually had to stop the workout and I texted it to my brother because he and I share quotes back and forth all the time and motivation. And I literally had to stop my workout because it was so good. So I want to share the quote and I want to also just talk a little bit about this because it's come up in a couple of contexts that I've been able to share it with other people, and also just kind of remind myself that this is very applicable to where Laura and I are in our journey of, opening our own practice and being business owners and taking these leaps of faith. So here's the quote. Ready? Fear and faith both require you to believe in something you cannot see. Which will you choose? It's just such a good quote,
So good.
right? Let me
So
think of,
autumn.
I mean, totally so autumn about it, but it's so true. Like in the context of the workout, it's the fear of failure. It's the feel of fear of not getting to the goal that you have. But then if you have the faith on the flip side of that coin, that you will make progress or that you will achieve the goals, but maybe not on the timeline that you think you're going to achieve them on. They both require you, like she said, to believe in something that you cannot see. If you're fearful of something, you don't know if that thing is going to happen. And if you have faith that something's going to happen, you still don't know that that thing is going to happen. So it requires you to rely on your beliefs. This, I think, plays really well into mindset. And this is a theme that Laura and I are always talking about is so important for you to be in control of the mindset. And it is a choice that you can make. You can choose to fear something or have faith. So a perfect example of this is my favorite quote ever from Laura Katina when she had left our prior firm and she had said to me with like I think the most overwhelming calm I have ever seen in my life was everything is just going to work out and I just know it will. And that faith, I was like, are you crazy? I'm afraid for you. Like it's a big deal to go out on your own and start your own business. And then, oh my gosh, the pandemic hit and everything. And you just had this like incredible sense of faith that things were going to work out. And knowing you as I do, I think the other part of that is that you're always going to find a way to make things work. Like that's just the work ethic that you have, that's the attitude that you take on, the mindset you have. But like for me, I was in a fear mindset on your behalf. But you had this like resounding faith in something that you didn't even know what it was going to look like, right?
And that can be scary, right? And so it's totally understandable why people choose fear because faith, it sounds funny, but like faith, having faith can be scary. Because you literally don't know, just like with fear, you don't know how it's going to work out, right? I always say, like the kids will ask me a question like, is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? And I'll say, only God knows. That's my belief, right? So
Right.
obviously there's people have all different kinds of beliefs.
Right.
But I'll say to them, like, only God knows what's going to happen, right? So you know how I am about my instincts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so when I left there, I knew I had no option. Like literally staying was just not, it was not an option.
Right.
So but I felt that it was going to be okay. And I just had to rely on that faith. That's what I was relying on because if I chose the fear, it would just make things worse for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it really is a mindset. And is it easy to do that? Absolutely not. It's incredibly difficult. Do I do it all the time? Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
So we're human beings. Like there are times where I am choosing fear and it's just, and I have to walk myself back and try to get myself to make a different choice. But at that point in time, I truly felt, and you said to me, I remember I was sitting in my office and you were like, aren't you afraid? Like, how are you so calm right now? I remember you saying that to me. And I said, I don't know. I just believe that it's going to be okay. And it was,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
And I said to, when we had a big lunch yesterday for Dawn's birthday, and the new attorney that's working with our firm, we were talking to her about building your own practice and just everything working out.
Mhm.
And I said to her right before we left, I said, when I think back like 3 years ago where I was, it seems so far away. So you will get to that point and it will work out the way it's supposed to. You just have to believe that it will, right?
I agree 1,000%. Like, without getting into all the scientific nerdy stuff for a second, we are hardwired to be afraid of things that we don't know, that we feel like might hurt us. And like,
Right.
there's a whole scientific, I don't know, literature and all the things that you could find out somewhere else, but that's not this podcast. Okay. So it's true that we kind of like resort to fear initially. But what's I think important and what really struck me in this quote was that you have the choice to choose between fear and faith. And you could be afraid of not meeting your goals. You could be afraid of, not being able to retain employees, or you could be afraid whatever it is in your life that you might be afraid of right now. But take a step back and realize, like, what is that going to do for your everyday life if you consistently choose fear over choosing faith? And so, for another example here, I'm speaking to another colleague of mine who's looking to transition jobs as well. And she was like, I'm afraid. I just don't know if I'm going to be, successful, or if I'm going to get this new position and whatnot. And we were talking back and forth, and I literally dropped this quote on her. And I said, choosing fear is going to mean choosing worry and anxiety. And it's going to make things so much more stressful. Not that where she is right now is terrible, but obviously there's a pull at her heart that there's certain factors and circumstances that are making her look elsewhere. So if you're already not feeling so great about where you are, and then you're going to choose fear and keep piling on the not so great feelings of worry, stress, insecurity, anxiety, all of that, it's just not going to bode well for your everyday life, right?
And I think part of it is having faith in yourself.
Mm,
And of course, Ed Milet is like, I'm obsessed with him.
uh-huh.
And this week on his show, so funny that we're talking about this. This just clicked in my head because I was listening to this week's episode this morning, and he interviewed Sean Casey, who was a Major League Baseball player. He was in Major League Baseball for 12 years. And this interview, I'm literally going to make my kids watch this. We're going to watch it later. It was so good. And he talked about the process of putting in the work. So, because you don't know what's going to happen, right?
Mhm.
Like, you don't know what the future holds. You don't know what the results are going to be. And you can't focus on the ultimate outcome. You have to focus on your process. And he
Mm.
said, like, he was not the best baseball player growing up. There was nobody looking at him when he wanted to play in college. And he had to learn his process. He had to do the work to make his swing better and do the work to get him in a place where he believed he was good enough, and the results would come. Like, he just had to put in the work. And Ed Milet was talking about, he coaches like the top of the top. So he works with a lot of professional athletes. And he was talking about how one of his clients is it UFC fighter? And he has a huge match coming up,
Mm.
and he sent him the client sent him a voice note and said, I'm afraid. I'm really afraid of this match, of this fight. And Ed Milet sent him a message back and said, so is the other guy. So while you think this is going to be the hardest fight of your life, don't think about it from his point of view too,
Right.
because this is going to be the hardest fight of his life. You've done the work. You have to have the faith in yourself
Mm.
that you're going to get it done. You don't know what the results are going to be.
Right.
So it's all about having faith and believing in yourself.
It's
How good, Amy, you have to listen to this episode.
I
It's so
can't
good.
wait. I am looking forward to it. I'm going to listen to it for sure. There's a lot. There's too many podcasts for me to catch up on right
Right?
now, but I always love his podcasts because he always drops such incredible truth bombs. Um, what I love about that though is again, it goes back to like what you're in control of. Like you can control every single thing in your own life, right? Very few things are uncontrollable. You will never be able to control other people. You will never be able to control someone else's perspective. In a business context, if you're worried about and fearful that you won't be able to find and retain clients, you can only do what you can do in order to make those clients want to work with you or those customers want to keep coming back for the services or the goods that you provide. You can't like mind warp people into believing that they should stay with you for any other reason but what you do.
Right.
So I love that you brought that up. And I didn't even think of that. That's the direction we were going today, but it's so good. And again, that ties back into what I said about you at the very beginning when you left is you said like everything is going to work out. And I just knew like Laura Katina will make it work out. Like I just knew that. Like there was no other option. So she was
Uh,
like, okay, this has got to work.
there was no other option. And sometimes, one of the other stories that Sean Casey gave in this interview was when he was playing in the World Series and they were losing 4-2. And
Mm,
he was up in the ninth inning and there were 60,000 fans. He said he's never heard anything so loud in his entire life, like that his ears were actually ringing.
crazy.
So, it was like 0-2. He had 2 strikes and he was like, this is it. Like if I can't strike out here. So he said, I had to go back to what I know. He said, I had to go back to my process because I cannot control the pitches that are being thrown at me. I
Right.
can't control the pitcher. I can't control anything else. He said, so I stepped out of the box. I went back to my breath and like centered myself and stepped back in and he hit a double. And he said it was all because I had to step back and remember my process, that I had done the work and have faith in myself because I can't control the outcome. It
Yeah.
was so good.
That is so good. But also like I'm looking at those two words, fear and faith. Faith in the future, faith in yourself, fear. What kind of belief do you have in yourself if you're fearful? You don't have any. Like
Right.
you set that aside and it's almost like you give up to these external circumstances. Like, I'm afraid it's never going to work out. I'm afraid. And where are you in fear? Like, where do you fall into play and what you can control and what you can do? Because it's almost like saying, like, you're not good enough. You can't figure it out. You don't know. And I mean, it's just occurring to me in a different way right now. And it's a different way to look at it. It's like you just really take yourself out of the game. You strike out in that circumstance.
Yep. That's
Fear
literally
is,
what he said. He said you take yourself out of the game by doing that.
and instead, faith would just be such a better, more optimistic, happier, positive, belief to have or thing to follow, as opposed to sitting in that. Could you imagine if he didn't step out of the box and he
Nope.
struck out?
Nope.
Like that little thing of just trusting yourself, having faith in yourself, having faith in the work that you put in, having faith in your process, your discipline, right? Like they always say, like motivation's not always going to get you there, but your disciplines are going to get you there. If you keep showing up and you keep doing the things and you're doing it, for towards your goals, you're working towards something, and it's also just bettering you overall as a person, whatever the result is going to be is going to be, but I guarantee you it's going to be a better result than if you didn't rely on your process.
And it's the same thing when you left
Yeah.
to join me. You
Yeah.
had to rely on your faith
Yeah.
in that scenario, right?
Yeah. And in that case, I was more afraid of going back to the same situation than I was of creating a new situation for myself. That's where
Yeah.
that ended up being. Because I just knew I didn't feel good. So it's like, why am I going to choose to continue to do the same thing that's not making me feel good in the situation that I'm in? I might as well have faith that, like, Laura's thriving. She's doing great. She's so much happier. She's got a different excitement and different kind of stress that's on her now. If I follow that, and if I don't like it, then what did you always tell me? If you
It's
don't
not
like it,
permanent.
you can go do something else. It's not permanent. Like, you're not signing with blood here that, like,
I
this
know.
is going to be the rest of your life. But then I ended up loving it. And I ended up also adopting that mindset of having faith in every step I was taking. When, this year I think was a crucial year for us and having faith, because we were confronted with so many, what did I call them? Like taps on the shoulders this year,
Yes.
where we were confronted with so many things and we were like, do we do it? Like, we hardly ever had glimmers of fear. We consistently
Yeah.
relied on that faith and like, everything is going to work out. We're going to figure it out together. We know where we're going. And it's crazy to see this last week alone, we are talking about things in our vision for next year that I feel like they're going to come true. And I believe that they will.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
I think that we came from an environment that was like engulfed in fear, and
Mm,
that's all it was. So it's hard when you're used to being in that frame of mind to make
yeah.
that change, right? It was like
Yeah.
fear, scarcity. And so it takes a lot of work to be able to step into faith when you are used to living in fear all
That
the
is
time.
so true. And I mean, listen, this is not like a light switch where we're like, oh, I think we're going to open our own firm. So we now need to believe in ourselves. We, I can say this personally for myself. If I was not putting myself first and taking care of myself and doing the hard hitting personal development and consuming the podcasts and the content that really do help change your mindset and realize that your mindset could be the biggest enemy against progress for you,
Yep.
then I don't think I would be here where I am. And I don't think I'd have the mindset that I have. So it takes a lot of hard work. It certainly is not something that's going to come overnight, but like anything else, it's a practice, I think. At the end of the day, it's a habit, it's a practice, whatever you want to call it. If you start to interrupt those negative thoughts and those fearful thoughts and start replacing them with faith, just like if you started to work on gratitude and affirmations every single day, as opposed to waking up with just dread about what you're going to face during the day, you will see it very incrementally change and shift your perspective on your days going ahead.
And a big part of faith for me too is trusting my instincts. And so I have not always done that,
Mm-hmm.
but my instincts are pretty good. And so now I know that.
Right.
And when I get feelings about something, I'm usually right. I have dreams about things that become reality, like this. So we're crazy, but it's true. So I've also a big part of faith for me has been actually listening to myself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think when we had Jen Purdy on for our podcast, that podcast episode, that speaks directly to that of trusting your instincts and having the mindfulness and self-awareness. But it's true. It's like, I think when I had a conversation with somebody about this previously, it was like my instincts were going to brighten greater and greater, and I'm seeing it more and more. And you just start to trust yourself. Maybe it's because you have more evidence behind you to say, I've made it work on so many other times when I thought that fear was the only way, but things ended up turning out good. And maybe that proof is what you need to just keep going and keep following your instincts too. Maybe. So if you're confronted with an opportunity between choosing fear and faith, maybe that's another tip we can leave you with, is take a look back at when things did work out. And when having belief in yourself actually produced the results that you were looking for, and build that book of proof for yourself to say, oh, you know what? I probably will be able to figure this out. And maybe fear is not necessary. I could be a little afraid, but I also can have some faith and
I
start to
think the
slow it
flip
in.
side, I think the flip side of that works too, is also look at the things that didn't work out, that you thought they were going a certain way and you were like devastated or upset that things
Mm,
didn't work out a certain way. Um, you know, it was meant to be that way. So if
so
you look
good.
back on those circumstances too, it wasn't for you. Like I don't, can you tell the story of something you were inquiring about, something you had interviewed for, and it didn't happen,
Yeah,
but
sure.
then there's a reason that it didn't happen.
Yeah, so after Laura had left our prior firm, I ended up looking outside of where we were, and I was going to interview for or apply for a position within the court system. And I actually did end up applying, and I did end up getting an interview with a judge to be their principal law clerk. And it was right before the pandemic, and then I found out about a week or two later that the judge ended up pulling from his current private practice and having an associate that he had been working with come on as his principal law clerk.
Which is
Fast
so
forward,
disappointing, right? So it's such a disappointment because it's
such a
something you were really
disappointment.
hoping for.
Because truthfully, if private practice was not going to be my thing, being in the court system would be my thing.
Yes. Yep.
I absolutely love it. I love the opportunity to work with judges, these brilliant minds, and to be able to have something brand new come across my desk every single
Yep.
day. Amazing, right?
Yeah.
And then fast forward a few months later, this judge had been assigned to his seat in the county that he was going to be working in, and then COVID happens and the judge passes away. And it made me realize in that moment, it was no longer about like the disappointment and the upset. Like that was not meant to happen, because the uncertainty that would have followed that of
Yep.
where would I go? What job would I get? Have I been out of private practice too long? Did I, lose out on the opportunities to continue to build relationships with clients and my colleagues, moving ahead? It was such a perfect example for me of sometimes things don't work out because they're not meant to work out.
Yeah.
And the reason is that I obviously, for two reasons. One, the uncertainty and the stress that would have caused me personally and my family would have been it's just insane for me. But secondly, I really truly believe that it was God, the universe, whoever you believe in, telling me like that's not the next step you're taking. The next step
Yep.
you're taking is really stay where you are, figure out that that's not where you're meant to be, and call Laura and say, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do this. And
And
that's
here we
truly what
are.
happened. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's a really great example of just how sometimes you can take a look back and realize that those things that you believed were going to be and they were meant to be for you, sometimes they just aren't. And it's because it's leaving space and room for something else to work out instead.
Yep. So if fear and faith both require you to believe in something you cannot see, which will you choose? We really want you to think about that question. So we hope this discussion was helpful for you today. We thank you for spending time with us, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.